classes and all AP classes.
Is it like math or is it like?
That's math, lots history. Yeah. Use that for school day and for practice night.
Excuse me. Hello. Can everybody hear me? Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tyler Murray. Thank you for joining the Young Americans for Freedom Foundation today. YAF is the leading movement for conservative Americans dedicating to inspiring others on the foundational ideas of individual freedom, strong national defense, free enterprise, and traditional values. Tonight is our second event of the year. Just last night, we placed 2,977 American flags in the chapel courtyard to signify the lives lost in the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Coming up, we, along with the debate club, are hosting a debate watch party tonight after this presentation. And we are working on projects in the next coming month to register people to vote in Wisconsin. So please be on the lookout for that. Part of the good thing about Wisconsin is being a college student here, you guys get to vote in Wisconsin regardless of what state you came from. So that is something to watch for because it's a really cool opportunity to be able to vote in person in the upcoming election. So we'd also like to thank the Badger Institute for sponsoring this event, and I'd like to turn it over to Wyatt to give a brief word on it.
Thank you, Tyler, Young Americans for Freedom, and thank you all for being here. My name is Wyatt Eicholtz. I'm currently a Policy and Legislative Associate at the Badger Institute, but not too long before that, I was a college student just like yourself, and also a proud YAFer. I graduated this past May from the University of Alabama, where I was heavily involved in our own chapter. Roll Tide, I heard it. After 5 years of conservative activism on campus, I joined the Badger Institute here in Wisconsin, our leading free market think tank. See, at Badger, we are guided by the belief that competitive and free enterprise, limited government, private initiative, personal responsibility, and civil society are essential to our way of life. We have 3 pillars as part of our mission that shape our work. At heart, we're a policy research institute. We generate reports that shape the discussion and debate on some of the most important issues facing our state. Our key policy issues include taxes, education, transportation, healthcare, crime and justice, and so much more. We also have an advocacy arm, which means that we have lobbyists in Madison that seek to influence lawmakers on behalf of Wisconsinites to implement our recommendations on those key issues. And finally, we have a burgeoning journalism arm, which means that we seek to tell the stories of everyday Wisconsinites that otherwise wouldn't get told, bringing to the forefront those faces of those whose lives are directly impacted by the policies that come down from Madison. Now, as a nonprofit organization, we take no money from the government and exclusively raise support from individuals and foundations who share our values and believe in our work. So to learn more about the Badger Institute and to get involved in our work, follow us on X, formerly Twitter, or Instagram at Badger Institute, or check out our website, badgerinstitute.org. We also have a literature table at the back that I'd encourage you to stop by. There's some great stickers as well, so you don't want to miss that. My colleagues and I are thrilled to be here with you tonight as the sponsor of this event that's so crucial to the very heart of our republic. Also, Mr. Maibach, on behalf of the Institute, thank you so much for dedicating your time and effort to tirelessly advocating for these principles. And with that, Tyler, back to you.
All right, so I'd like to introduce our speaker for tonight, Mr. Michael Maibach. Michael Maibach is a seasoned professional in global business diplomacy, advisor to nonprofit organizations, and a supporter of civic engagement. Mr. Maibach has earned 7 university degrees. While earning his first degree, he was elected to the DeKalb County Board in his native Illinois, becoming the first American elected to public office under 21 years of age in U.S. history. Michael is a native of Peoria, Illinois, where he spent his Intel career at California Silicon Valley. He has lived in Old Town, Alexandria, Virginia for 25 years and has a winter home in Naples, Florida. Please join me in welcoming Michael Maibach for tonight's presentation on the Electoral College and how other Republicans elect heads of government.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and a handsome bunch of students. When I was over there talking to someone, I said, wow, this is a big turnout. She said, yes, I heard it was a funeral. No, no one's died, but we'll talk about the founders a little bit. Now, before I get to our topic here, I grew up in Peoria, Illinois, and I went to Catholic grade school. And in first grade, we walked in, Sister Jean said, everyone take out construction paper and crayons, and I want you for 15 minutes to draw a picture of a famous person. So we proceeded to draw. I think I drew a baseball player. And after 15 minutes, she said, please put the crayons down. But Patrick Monroe, one of my first grade colleagues, continued to color. And after a while, Sister Jean said, now, Patrick, please stop. We have to get on with explaining to everybody who's drawn whom. And he said, it's very important that I finish. I'm not done yet. She said, well, why is it so important? Who are you drawing? And he said, I'm drawing a picture of God. To which she said, well, no, Patrick, no one knows what God looks like. To which she replied, they will in a minute. And so a lot of people don't understand the Electoral College, maybe don't like it, but hopefully in a few minutes they'll understand why we have it. So we're going to do that now. So James Wilson, one of the authors of the Constitution and the Declaration, only 5 people signed both of those documents. He was an immigrant from Scotland, and he said law and liberty cannot be rationally become the objects of our love unless they first become the objects of our knowledge. That's why you're here tonight. That's why you're in college, to understand that liberty is hard won and hard protected. 2 American Revolutions, 1776, the Declaration, of course. It's the most important political document in the history of the world because it says we're endowed by our creator. That's the idea of natural law or natural rights. Nobody else believes that. I've been to 68 countries. I haven't found a country that thinks they get the rights from God. Every country thinks they get it from the parliament or from the king or the czar or whomever. The other revolution was our Constitution, which is the Constitution we have today, and it is the world's oldest. We're one of the youngest countries in the world, but it's the world's oldest Constitution. Schumpeter said that talent hits a target no one else can hit, but genius hits a target no one else can see. Because nobody had written a constitution like this before. So they were the first ones. And it is a great constitution because it has kept us free. Gladstone, a prime minister for 12 different years in the United Kingdom, said the United States Constitution is the most wonderful work ever struck off by the brain and purpose of man. Now, if you go away with no other lesson this evening, the lesson about the founders is they believe that man's nature is broken. They studied human nature. That's why we need redemption and forgiveness, because we're all broken, right? At least as Christians, that's what we believe. Not everybody believes that. Some people don't. But the founders did. And we have to understand they also feared human nature because human nature can go very wrong. And they feared, therefore, majority tyranny. This man Churchill said, the further you can look backward, the further you can look forward. Now, why would he say that? Why does anything in the past tell us about what might happen in the future?
It'll repeat itself.
Yes, because man's nature does not change, right? So we have a broken nature, always has been, always will be, and we cannot change nature. Our government cannot change our nature. They can force us to do things we don't want to do, but they can't change our nature. Now, 58 delegates went to Philadelphia in 1787, and 38 signed the Constitution. The ones that didn't sign it because they didn't have a Bill of Rights, which we got very quickly afterwards. The Federalist One, which is the Federalist Papers, are 85 essays written by Madison, John Jay, and Hamilton for the New York newspapers to make sure the New York Ratifying Convention passed the Constitution. Once they wrote the Constitution, all 13 states had conventions like this, 200 or 300 delegates who debated whether or not to accept the Constitution. It was a very close vote in New York, and so they're very worried about it. But he writes in Federalist One, it's reserved to the people of this country to decide whether societies of men are really capable of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they're forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. Because before we chose our constitution, everybody had their life run by whoever was the king or the head of the military. Some people say the Electoral College is undemocratic, is part of voter suppression, that the majority should rule. But the founders would say, don't save our democracy, save our republic, because we are a republic, not a democracy. The purpose of the Constitution is to restrict the majority's ability to harm a minority, James Madison. So this is our inheritance. This division of powers is so that not one of these branches controls the whole country, right? American Revolution. Now, the world of 1776, the reason I start early days like this is because the first time I gave this speech was Bradley University in Peoria about 5 years ago, and after the speech where I started in Philadelphia, a young lady stood up and said, the reason I don't like the founders is they didn't give women the right to vote. We all know, yes, isn't that terrible? So I said, now, Susan, in what countries in the world in 1776 were women voting? No countries ever in human history. The world was full of tyranny, slavery, and poverty when our founders created this government. Liberty, nowhere. This is the head of the Chinese government. He wasn't elected by anybody, or Japan, or Russia. Catherine the Great was still the head of Russia. Holy Roman Empire lasted until 1806, Emperor Joseph II. Charles III in Spain, Louis XVI, who later died in the French Revolution, George III, that was our problem. We were revolting against him. Those were the rulers. Our rulers don't look like this. Our rulers have to ask us for our votes, like tonight, right? Slavery everywhere. Slavery, we didn't invent slavery in 1619, that's for sure. This is a slave market in ancient Rome. Slave trade routes here in Africa, where they would buy and sell their enemies to each other. The Ottoman Empire, which is Turkish today, they had slaves. Slave markets in Egypt, and probably 10 to 15 million slaves were brought from Africa to North and South America. They were sold to the Europeans who were shipping them to the New World by African tribes. So there was plenty of blame to go around for slavery, that's for sure. We fought a civil war. 750,000 people died to get rid of it. Now, in 1700, the three European powers, the French, the Spanish, and the British, were running North America. Those were the empires at the time. We were British subjects, Spain, England, and France. So we had a revolution against the British, and we won. The founders studied history And Cicero, who was a famous a statesman and member of the Senate in the Roman Republic, said, if you don't know history, you will always be a child. This is why you want to find out about your parents and your grandparents. This is why you study history, to find out where you came from, what happened to this world that made the world the way it is before you. Now, this is a picture of downtown Washington, D.C. before they put the metro. Now, these are the ruins of earlier civilizations. This is Greece. We're really a Greco-Roman society, Western. Now, what is this picture of? The trial of who? Socrates. He's in the orange there. He was put on trial because after the Peloponnesian Wars, which was very damaging for both Sparta and Athens, they had years and years of war for no purpose, really, in a way. And he was asking questions of the youth, which is, why do you want to be a soldier when you could do something else with your life? Why do you want to be involved in eternal wars? Well, for that, he was put on trial for corrupting the youth, because the elected assembly of Athens, these are all men, didn't really want him asking questions of the young people. All he did was ask questions. This is a painting of the death of Socrates, because he was convicted by the elected assembly by a majority vote, and he took the hemlock. That's how you did it when you had the death penalty. You took the poison yourself. You can go to that place today, the Agora in Athens, to see where he did this. The point is that an elected assembly, by a majority vote, voted to kill the old man for asking questions. Raise your hand if you're for free speech. Raise your hand if elected majorities, assemblies, can become tyrannical. Now, there's many. To understand the founders, they were for free speech. That's what's called the Liberty Bell, not the Diversity Bell, right? Free speech, and they were for freedom. And they didn't want elected governments to take over your liberty, right? So Plato wrote a book, which I think you should all read. It's only 40 pages. And it's called Plato's Apology, or Explanation of the Death of Socrates. Because he was in the bushes. This was his teacher. He's in that picture. The man in the orange with his hand on the leg of Socrates, that's Plato. Plato started the first university. You're in the university. Well, Plato started the first one called the Academy. That's a Greek term. When he was 24 years old, he wrote this, and it's a wonderful book. I wept the first time I read it. I want you to read it, and some of you will. What it talks about is the broken nature. He watched the elected elders of his town kill his teacher for asking questions. And so he realized that elected assemblies can be a problem because our nature is broken. So he wrote a book called his Republic, Plato's Republic, a very famous political science book, if you're a government major. And in chapter 8, he says, tyranny naturally arises out of democracy. Now, is there a young lady here who has 4 older brothers? 3 older brothers? Oh, 2 older brothers? Well, if it's just you and the 2 brothers, you know something about tyranny, right? The majority. Okay. Now, his #1 student was Aristotle. And Aristotle wrestled with the problem of majority tyranny. And he wrote a book called The Politics. He came up with the idea of a mixed regime. In other words, we have to divide power. And the Romans took him up on it. So a Caesar and a Senate and assembly, because he had talked about a king, the aristocracy, and citizen. Checks and balances, we call this, right? And that was in 350 BC. But here is what the Roman Republic did. They put it into action. But look at Isaiah 33:22. This is 300 years before Aristotle. The Lord is the judge, the lawgiver, and the king. Are those the 3 branches? Isn't that interesting? Before Aristotle came up with the idea, there it was in the Old Testament. Now, this is a painting of the Roman Senate because it was a republic for a while. But Caesar, Julius Caesar had come back from victorious battle and wanted to be named sort of the Caesar, sort of lifetime Caesar, wanted to be the king. And the Senate didn't like that idea, so they killed him. There's a painting of the death of Julius Caesar, and that was the end of the Roman Republic. It became the Roman Empire. Thou shalt not follow a multitude to do evil. This is about majority tyranny. So this looks like downtown Washington because when our founders started our government, they looked at what happened in Rome, the good and the bad, and said, we want to be a Roman Republic. We don't want to be a Roman Empire. And that's why our buildings look like that, the classical buildings. Because those classical buildings reflect the look and feel of a human body. It's an architectural discussion we won't have, but the Roman Republic is one of the main influences for our government. But the number one book that the founders quoted was the Bible. Of all their correspondence, their discussions, their speeches, and the books that they referred the most to were Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Romans. And of course, the Liberty Bell, 1751, has an Old Testament quote. Only one quote they chose: proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. Now, this is a man named Montesquieu, who's a Frenchman. He spent 20 years to write a book called The Spirit of the Laws. And he was struggling with why democracies always become tyrannies, as Aristotle did. There's nothing new under the sun, but this was 1700 years later. And he wrote a book called The Spirit of the Laws. All the founders read it. And he came up with the modern idea of the checks and balances. We hear about that in our government all the time. Matter of fact, we have two people in debate tonight to be the head of the executive branch, but we have members in the Senate and the House and the Supreme Court. So we have that structure. Now, the Americans, the founders, had lived like everybody else under rules, the king, whomever, and the power was unlimited. However, their goal was to limit power. How do you limit the power of government? You write down in a constitution what the government cannot do to you. And that's the idea of a written constitution. Here is Patrick Henry, one of the revolutionaries. The Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It's an instrument for the people to restrain the government. That's what Republican government is. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. Matter of fact, the word democracy does not appear in the Constitution. How about that? Save our republic. To secure, this is Jefferson, to secure those rights, governments are instituted. So when Jefferson says you have your rights, well, how do you secure those? Governments are meant to secure your rights, not to control your whole life. Here's Jefferson. In questions of power, then, let no more be heard of confidence in man, our nature, because our nature is broken. Yeah. Broken. Bind him down for mischief by the change of the Constitution. Right? The word law in Latin means what? To bind. So a law is to bind, and the law of the Constitution is to bind the government, right? So we have the checks and balances in our government. Now, get to the Constitutional Convention. They assembled in Philadelphia in 1787, and Madison wrote in his diary, the central problem we're going to face is representation. We have 13 states, some are large, some are small, different geographies, different histories, different religions. You know, lots of Catholics in Maryland, none at all in the South, etc. Virginia had 750,000 people. Georgia had 1/10. Delaware and Rhode Island were even smaller than that. This man was a delegate from Delaware, and this is his speech in the early days of the Constitutional Convention. I do not, gentlemen, trust you. You gravely allege that there is no danger of combination. The larger states, you say, will be rivals of one another. This is language calculated only to amuse us. Yes, sir, the larger states will be rivals, but not against each other. They will be rivals against the rest of the states. So nice to be with you here in Philadelphia. So he was telling the larger states, because he came from the smallest state, we don't trust New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Virginia, where most of the people live. But Madison brought his Virginia plan, and it did not work. Patterson had the New Jersey plan, it did not work. And then we had the Great Compromise, which allowed for our government. What's it called besides the Great Compromise? There's another name, starts with a C, it's one of the states. The Connecticut Compromise. It's called Connecticut Compromise because Roger Sherman on the right was a delegate from Connecticut. Madison on the left was from Virginia. And the compromise was that the House of Representatives will represent populations. And the Senate will be 2 votes for every state, no matter how large or small. So the only reason why we have a constitution is because the large states and the small states did this compromise. The last week of the Constitutional Convention, they still hadn't decided how to elect a president. So they had debates and discussions. Should we have a popular vote? Well, then it'd always be somebody from Virginia or somebody from New York or Philadelphia. Election by Congress. Well, no, then the president will just do whatever the Congress tells them to do. They won't be independent, and there'll be no check. Remember, we want to have checks and balances, just like Aristotle and Montesquieu. Election by the states. Yes, we will have elections in every state, and we'll aggregate those elections, the electoral college system, which is what we have. It's a solution to the problem they had, not a problem itself. And that's the checks and balances we ended up with. Plus, we got a commander-in-chief when things are difficult. Now, the election of 1860, how many candidates were in that election for president? This is right at the beginning, just before the Civil War started. Well, there are 4 candidates. They're listed right there. And Lincoln from Illinois got 39.8% of the vote because the vote was divided up. So nobody got the majority, and he only got less than 40%. But he got 18 of the 33 states to vote for him in the majority, and that's the majority of the states. And because people really were interested in states' rights in those days, he was seen as legitimate, which allowed him to go on and be a courageous leader to end slavery and keep the Union together, which is quite a miracle. Probably one of the greatest people who ever lived. And only 39.8% of people voted because nobody won the popular vote. 2 presidents won the presidency, and only 2 without winning the majority of the states, John Kennedy and Jimmy Carter. Everybody else has won the majority of the states. Now, 2000, 2016, we had a lot of controversy because the candidates who lost had more votes than the candidates who won. So in 2000, Al Gore got more votes, but I think it was 300,000 votes more than Bush. But Bush won 30 states, and Mrs. Clinton, she won, I think she had 3 or was it 4? No, sorry, 2.5 million more votes, mostly all from California. But Trump had won 30 states out of 50 states. That's how our system works. It forces candidates to visit lots of states and not just a few with big cities. But since 1904, the Electoral College has elected 15 Democrats and 15 Republicans. So it's a pretty even batting average of the system. It's not highly tilted one party or the other. Now we're going to talk about baseball because I know we have some baseball players here. This is the 1960 World Series where the Pirates and the Yankees played 7 games. It was tied in the 7th game, 3 games all. And the bottom of the 9th, the Yankees were ahead. They were about to win, 2 outs. And Bill Mazeroski right here, third baseman, came up. And a couple guys were on base, and he hit a home run called a walk-off home run. And he won the World Series. It's very famous, dramatic, because one swing of the bat and the whole series was over. And so 4 games to 3. And who's on the baseball team? There's lots of baseball teams there. Right there. Oh, I thought they're back there. They're very shy. Okay. We got hockey and football right here. Okay. So the question is that fair? 4-3, the Pirates won, right? Do you know that in those 7 games, the Pirates had a total of 27 runs, and the Yankees had a total of 55 runs, more than twice as many. Now, is that fair? Well, the Super Bowl is the same way. It's not the most points, it's the most games, right? And March Madness, you know, the Sweet 16 and the Final Four and all that, it's the most games, not the most points. Most sports, there's volleyball players, the manager is here, and one of the players is here. In volleyball, it's the most games, not the most points, right? Yeah, there you go. Now, we're rounding the corner here toward the end, but we want to talk about the European Union. How many countries are in the European Union? Who knows? Okay, any guesses? 27. Okay, 27 heads of government. And here they are. Every year they have a picture taken. As you can see, it's required to have a blue outfit or suit on. So Mrs. Merkel from Germany, she wore the red. That's why she's no longer in power in Germany. She just will not cooperate with the rest of these people. But this is a picture of the 27 heads of government in the European Union from a few years ago. How many of these heads of government are elected by a national popular vote? Yes. What's that? You said all or none? Some is right. It's very good. How much is some? Right. Thank you for trying. Courageous, young man. Anybody have a guess on how many of the 27 have a national popular vote to elect these people in the blue outfits? Yes, sir.
23.
Cyprus, which is like Club Med, you know, it's an island, and France. That's it. Now, the French had their revolution in what year? Anybody? 1789. And what year was our Constitution ratified? 1789. It was written in 1789, ratified in 1889. So the year we got our Constitution agreed to by the states, the French were having the revolution. And since 1789, how many constitutions have we had? Just the one. Well, the French are on their, it's called the Fifth Republic, they're on their fifth since 1789. So who has the more durable system, the national popular vote folks, or checks and balances electoral college? At least it's a good question, isn't it? Right. Now, why is it that they don't have national popular vote in all those European places? Well, this is a painting of the French Revolution where he went from a king, Louis XVI, to a parliament, to Napoleon, is a different type of king, to another king, etc. And so what they learned in the revolution was, it's not easy. Self-government is not easy. That's why we have the oldest constitution in the world. The second oldest is the Italian Constitution. It's 80 years old. Well, the Canadian is 1854, I think. It was a terrible revolution. Now, at another revolution, they're very good at this, 1848 in France, and another revolution. This is where people on the streets say, were you around in COVID when we had all the riots in Minneapolis and all that stuff? Well, think about that for a year or two, not just 2 weeks or something like that. Pretty bloody, pretty difficult. Well, in Europe in 1848, it's a hinge moment in history, 30 countries had revolutions where they toppled the regimes. Talk about violence, my gosh. And so this told people that were working on constitutions and other things, it told them, you know what, we really don't want mob rule. It's very dangerous, and it crushes whose rights. Minority rights, very good. All right. This is us. Remember this just for a week or two we had? I'd like to have this for a year in your cities. You don't. These revolutions caused Alexis de Tocqueville to come to America in 1835 and write Democracy in America. Who knows about democracy in America, that book? Anybody? One hand. But, okay, it's a wonderful book, 700 pages. Do you want to understand anything about America? Like there's a chapter on why women are strong in America, for example. Why great men don't run for office in America. He's got chapters on that. Now, this is the Electoral College of Great Britain. How do they elect the prime minister? These people. In the last 3 years, they had how many prime ministers in Great Britain? 4. Thank you very much. 4. And who elected those prime ministers? Did the people? Do they have a popular vote? Or do these people elected those prime ministers? There's 600 members. They had 600 members electing their prime minister, and they had 60 million people in that country. Is that democratic? We have 50 popular votes in our states. Is that more democratic than the parliament?
Yes.
Okay, this is Germany's electoral college. This is Spain. You get the idea? I won't do 27 of them, or actually 20, 25. But you get the idea. This is where they elect their head of government because they don't want to have the people do it. They don't trust them. These people get elected by people, and then they elect the leader. The Swiss so fear tyranny that they have a 7-member executive, and every year they rotate being the chief executive so that nobody becomes too strong. They really, really, really don't want to have mob rule in Europe. Now, this is the Canadian Electoral College. They have 6 parties up there, by the way. We don't know that, but they do. This man is 2-term prime minister. We don't like him, do we? No. Okay. We invited him, but he wouldn't come. Okay. His party in 2021 got 33% of the vote. The Conservatives got 34, but he had 160 seats, the most games. They had 119, so he's the prime minister with 1/3 of the vote. Now, Lincoln is the lowest popular vote in our history. In our history. You're going to find when we have election November, either Mrs. Harris or Mr. Trump is going to be the president, probably by 49 to 51 or something, 50-50, something very close. But these members of parliament get elected in Europe. They get 25, 30, 35% of the vote. So now these are flags of countries that have parliamentary elections or head of government, all right? Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Morocco, Norway, India, Singapore. This is how we elect our president. Rather than parliament, we have electors go to our state capitals, and they vote for us after you voted. Which is more democratic? 600 people in the British House of Parliament, or 300 million Americans, 180 million Americans voting, and then they go to their state capitals. But a lot of people say the majority should rule. So I'm going to show you now the flags of countries where they have a national popular vote for their head of government. And I want you to get your pen and paper out because you're going to want to take these down because these are going to be places where you want to be patient. Because these are places that have national popular votes. Just a second. Okay, there we go. Iran, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Russia, Afghanistan, Mexico, Turkey, Zimbabwe. That's what have national popular vote. Who wants to live there? Anybody? Nobody. The fellow that just probably came in first in Venezuela just went to Spain because he thought he would be killed by Maduro in Venezuela. But some people do want to have a national popular vote. Some California business people came up with the idea to have a national popular vote in America. It's a little joke here. And today, 17 legislatures, including the one, well, all the ones you see here, have passed the National Popular Vote Compact trying to change our system. So it's a real debate in the country. That's why I do this. And these are the battleground states. So Wisconsin and Michigan, you're in the battleground. In other words, you have a mixed government here. You have a Democrat governor, and you have what I don't know if your House or Senate. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat. Is how it is. they're both Republican. The states that have passed the National Popular Vote Compact, and I'm not here to speak for a political party, but every state there had a House, a Senate, and a governor, all in one party, the Democratic Party. So this is a project, unfortunately, of one party in our politics trying to get rid of the Electoral College and have a national popular vote. Now, this is how divided we are. This is the Biden won 25 states, and so did Trump, but Biden won 527 counties, Trump won 2,585, 10 times the counties. So we have one party that's pretty much a coastal, sort of Boston, New York, Chicago, and then LA, up and down the coast. This is our country by population. We want to have a national popular vote. This is where the people are. 9 states have half of our people. You want to have 9 states decide every president, the other people just ignore it? New Mexico. They have no license plate. USA. Because a lot of Americans think that it's part of Mexico. Okay, anyway. New York City has more people than 39 of our states. New York City, 9 million people. More people than 39 of our states, including Wisconsin. LA County has more people than 41 states. Now, this is a picture of, who's from California? Anybody? Yes, way back there. Okay. LA County? Okay, well, you know then, this is a freeway, LA County. They have 40 lanes going each way. And these people actually live in these cars now. They never leave these cars. They have refrigerators and they're online, their computers. They just live there because, you know, you just can't get in there. That's a certain way of life, isn't it? This is a different state, very different state of mind, isn't it? Nothing wrong with Montana or California, but these are very different lives, different industries, different people, different mindsets. Right? Cities are different than countryside. You know that. Who here is from a farm? Anybody from a farm? Yes, sir. What did you grow? Etc. Corn, hay, etc. That covers a lot of things. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes, where? Corn, hay, you mean soybeans? Those. Not green beans. Okay. Very good. This is Manhattan. Everybody know Manhattan. That's part of New York. Anybody from Manhattan here? Of course not. No. Okay. Manhattan has a park. I don't know if you know this. It's called Central Park. You know about this? How many acres are in this park? Who knows how many acres in Central Park? 843, exactly. And in this park, how many of these acres are farmed? Okay, very good. You guys have really studied up for this lecture. Okay. So, believe it or not, in Manhattan, it takes 5 acres to feed one person. I don't know if you know that or not. That's for 1 year, it takes 5 acres. So, Central Park, if it was farmed, could feed 168 people a year. Now, how many people are in New York City?
9 million.
Very good. 9 million. So Central Park isn't going to quite do it, is it? Right. No. Now this is a Whole Foods. So they don't farm in New York City, but where's that food come from? Iowa. Etc. Right. This is an etc. right here. No, these come from Iowa. Florida, yes. It's corn and beans. Yes, yeah. Now, why do you think we start our primaries with the people that feed the city? There's not very many people there because every time they have 5 acres, that feeds one person, right? The American farmer feeds over 200 people, including this man, Mr. Et cetera, here. And, you know, when they have a primary, they actually can meet the candidates. Isn't that novel? They can meet them, talk to them. Here's Mr. Kennedy on a hayloft running. This was this year. And then they go where? After Iowa, they go where? Where? New Hampshire. These guys, okay. And see, he has free advice for presidential candidates. You'll love this, right? Because it's a small state with little towns and small businesses. And these are the pictures. There's Trump. God knows what he's talking about here. Make America, etc. Again. Here's Ronald Reagan saying, I paid for this microphone. That was a famous New Hampshire thing. Here's Mrs. Clinton, a little more with things, okay. Let's get back to New York City. And here's George Bush. The point is, it's retail politics. Iowa, New Hampshire, retail politics. We actually talk to people, right? And then what happens after that? This is what happens. Can you, as Americans, get to know these candidates standing on a TV stage, what they're like? No. So I asked the governor of New Hampshire, who, by the way, did you see in the news he helped somebody not choke to death? Yep. Did you read about this? Yeah, there was a lobster eating contest in New Hampshire. This was today, and he gave a Heimlich. And the governor, Governor Sununu, I met him last year, and I said to him, why is it important to have the New Hampshire primary? To which he said, because people in New Hampshire can tell across the table. Across the table. And nobody's been president until Mr. I guess Mr. Harris is elected president, who hasn't gone through the Iowa, New Hampshire process. A wonderful filter system. So the Constitution has been amended 27 times. The founders saw a purpose of the Electoral College and ensured that small rural states would retain importance in national elections. Now, there's only two basic industries, and those two basic industries are
agriculture and mining.
Agriculture and mining. In other words, everything in this building, everything you're sitting on, this is raw materials, right? And then your dinner tonight, your meals today. Those are the two basic things upon which everything else is made, right? And this is where some of our crops are grown. There's etc. crops right here. Of our top 5 agricultural states, Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas are in those 3. A lot of people in those states? No, because you're using all their acreage to feed the rest of the country, right? Top wheat producing states, Wisconsin's in there. Now, this is the assembly line in Chicago, and it's the world's oldest continuously running automobile assembly line. So Ford goes way back in history, has 5,800. Now, what is the #1 ingredient of an automobile?
Metal.
What kind of that? What kind of metal? Steel, very good, steel, all right. And so let me ask you a question. In downtown Chicago, do they have iron mines? Oh no, this is America's largest iron mine. It's in Mountain Iron, New Mexico. You messed me up, okay. So, Minnesota. The point is, to make those cars in Chicago, they have to have somebody at this place who gives them the raw materials. So whether it's food or natural resources, we need the smaller states in terms of population to feed and to allow for other people to have their professions. This is natural gas. Nothing in Wisconsin. If you have natural gas in your house or your school, coming from another state. So finally, we're a nation of states. 13 states signed the Declaration. 13 debated the Constitution. We have a U.S. Senate, which is an assembly of states. The Senate, which is the states, confirms ambassadors, judges, members of the cabinet. They ratify treaties, trade agreements. If somebody gets impeached by the House, the Senate decides if they throw them out or not. All of us need to be reminded the federal government did not create the states created the federal government. We have majority rule times 50, so we have 50 elections for president. I'm going to end on a positive note, the sinking of the Titanic. Who has seen the movie? Okay, who's really good at the movie? Okay, what happens as soon as they hit? What does the captain do? You know. Does he call the staff into a meeting at the table? Okay, and he designed the ship was on the ship in real life. He died in the Titanic. And they laid out, remember in the movie, they lay out the map and he says, where has the ship been pierced? The first 3 or 4 compartments. And he said that to save money, we didn't put the compartments all the way to the top. And now that it's been pierced, because it's supposed to be an unsinkable ship, the water will continue to flow in, and one after another will, he said, in 2 hours and 30 minutes, we will sink. And that's what happened. In 2 hours and 30 minutes, the Titanic sunk because all the compartments were open to each other, right? National popular vote is like that. If we had a national popular vote, just think we had a recount of 180 million votes. How would you do that? That would never end, right? Nobody would ever trust it, right? Does anybody know what this is? Who knows? Yes, you have to be over 23 to know what this is. This is,
More than 2,000. Recount.
Wow.
so, okay, he's a government major, okay? And he's also a football player. He's at end, something like that.
Running back.
A running back, which, who knows what that's. So, what happened when we had the Florida recount? This is Bush v. Gore. We had 50 state elections, and when Florida couldn't decide, all the other states stood back and said, we'll wait for Florida to decide the election. Right? Well, it wasn't crazy because we got a result. Mrs. Thatcher, Prime Minister for 11 years in Great Britain. Europe was created by history, and that's for sure. The Germanic tribes and Franks, and on, the Romans. America was created by a philosophy, which is the checks and balances, constitutional government, limited government, all the things we've talked about here. Republic, not a democracy. Presidents can veto. Senate has filibusters. 2 senators for Rhode Island and California. The Supreme Court's not elected by anybody. They're appointed by the president with consent of the states. It's a very mixed thing in order to keep us free. If you remove one flying buttress from this church, what happens?
Crashes.
Thank you. Crashes. Thank you very much. Constitution of government once changed. Freedom can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever. Human nature never changes for this reason. Everything is predictable. We have either ordered liberty right here. This is what you were born in. This is what goes to the world. I should like to live now in the Ukraine. And that's what their life is like. Finally, don't interfere with anything in the Constitution. That must be maintained, for it is the only safeguard of our liberties. So that's the conclusion of the talk, and if there's any questions, we'd be happy to hear them. Thank you very much. You know where the cameras are. So if you look at the left room, college is a collection. So the left towards that's not. All of them. They're appointed by the political parties, members of the party. So every party has one. Okay. Okay, very good. All right.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
It was a great speech. I enjoyed it.
okay. And what's your name? Roland? And then whoever runs, 4 years ago, I read it. And then everybody does it. This is the congressional district. So every party has elected. The only one party. So it's all ready to vote. Whoever wins that. Some ones are good. Yeah, I go to Richard. And the Democrats. Hi guys, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, well, It's a very
That's right. Do we want to do it? Do we want to do it? Do you want to do it from? I like the part of the Constitution. That's just my personal vote.
Okay, these are mine here. Oh, we're gonna right here?
Yeah, we can, right with the
I went
closing.
to high school. Okay, so here we are, Lincoln, okay.
Yeah. You want to go right in the middle there?
Well,
These guys are all very tall.
it's like
Michael.
the mountains.
How tall are you?
6'7".
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
The mountains in the valley here.
Hold on a second. I think, what is your name again?
Jenna.
I think you dropped your phone.
It's all shaky.
No, it's,
Oh crap. I'm my brother.
okay.
Brother, it's always-
Immediate.
I tried to find a girl with 3 brothers in this group, to talk about majority tyranny.
Well, you know, if people have less kids, it's.
They are.
Yeah, that was interesting that nobody had 4 older brothers.
Or 3.
My
Three's the one
my
that
sisters have 4 older brothers.
Yeah, see, and then I say, you know something about majority tyranny. But see, I went to Catholic schools, everybody had 4, 5, 6, 10.
Yeah.
I had 2 uncles that had 10 kids each. It's just, let's have some kids.
I don't know a single person that's had more than 5.
My wife is one of 10. I'm one of 6.
Yeah. Oh, you're required.
Oh, yeah.
They have a quota.
My parents are still alive, but yeah. Didn't have room.
There you go. This is fun. Huh? Thanks for having me. Yeah, my card is back there. If you want to get it, or I can give you cards. I don't know if you need them or not. I have to have them back in the morning. So come out to the airport. Okay.
Did you guys get an opportunity to see the 9/11 memorial?
I did actually, and I was telling your colleagues that I called the father of the I sent a picture.
Well, so I live in Virginia. In a way, electorate means a lot. Because every party chooses electors. And then whoever wins the states are elected. Libertarian electors, Republican, Democrat. Of course, in our system, it's very different. So I'm a Republican elector 4 years ago. Trump, 4 years ago.
We want, that was, we planned this out.
He didn't win.
It's a wonderful gesture. and actually-
No, so Virginia has 13 electors. So we have 11 House members.
And I'll mention that you guys did this.
We have 11 congressional districts, so 1 elector from the Republican Party per congressional district. And then 2 statewide chosen for state convention.
Oh, it's actually,
And the Democrats actually the same.
on our website.
And then we also, so I'm ready December 3rd to go to Richmond to vote for Trump if he wins Virginia. If he doesn't win Virginia, then the Democrats go. That's how it works. So every party has elections. And the reason this way is because, you know, there's 250 people in the convention. I got.
Now, why does that?
250. Because I had. Really? I had, I think, 412 votes. And the other person has 112. So like 500 people at the convention. Well, the first question they ask you when you're running is, will you live up to your responsibility? as a voter? And I say yes.
I saw you. I saw that, yeah.
Oh,
Not that long.
it would be like the trade season.
Yeah.
It used to be an option until said you
Okay.
can't really change. You gotta put it up. So it's called favorite electors. They have done a few in the past. Typically, it's when somebody, like one of the first ones was somebody cast a vote for a woman,
Jenna.
president, whoever.
People
won.
were.
So they were just-
I'm just gonna put my phone so it's on the next
It's like that, just say, well, since, since Barack Obama's gonna win, I'm gonna cast one of my ballots for
Wait, who else?
Herbert Hoover or something.
What about? Is it?
It's usually it's somebody they really admire,
We have a little problem between me and you. But tell them that we met and that,
John Kennedy.
we'll met ways at some point, especially when he gets elected.
It's too serious.
Well, you're his daughter. Okay. Very cool.
One in
Yeah.
Colorado and one in.
Mike Nichols. Yeah. You wrote an article about me that I
And
really
they said, because these guys were.
but that's kind of here.
out of whack. And the Supreme Court said, you know.
Yeah. But I'll tell them, hey, thank you guys for having me. Oh, absolutely.
Well, great, okay, I give other talks, you know, and.
I'm not in charge of the crowd.
You got a nice stand.
Well, thanks, yeah, I hope it was helpful. I learned in this crowd that I had to start asking people to answer questions because, just give the answer, because there's not a lot of history of majors here.
I think it's a crowd. There's a crowd. I heard of it.
Yeah.
A lot of people, it's not worth
Where's it
No.
located?
That's where they all ran out. And they want to take the debate in 20 minutes, right?
Oh.
This was fun, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Have a good night, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
I gotta stop the Zoom recording if you want me to.
What's that?
I can get it for you. Just make sure everything's all set. 'Cause I
Oh,
gotta,
being recorded?
yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
I know some people that register with Badger Institute said that